what's it? It's I, Harold Gear, and this is my Rikka deck profile. The Umbrella Gang of the Water Plant Waifus is still a fun deck to play, and as some of you know, in Dortmund, the Rikka deck just recently won that regional. So I want to show you guys a closed version of a pure build that I have, just in case anyone new out there is trying to figure out if they want to play this deck and try out a fun little plant option in our meta. Like, sub, and bell, and let's count the cards. Also, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Starting things off with 2 copies of Rikka Petal. This is always a great deuce in the decks. On summon, you can take a Rikka card and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. This is one of the card's actions of this archetype which lock you into plant monsters, but being locked into plants is no big deal. Also, at the end of your opponent's turn, if you control all plant monsters or no monsters, Petal special summons herself back from the graveyard. Both of her effects are once per turn. Next up, 3 copies of Rikka Princess. I have to get the shinier version of this card. It's a good extender, but when you extend with it, it locks you into special summoning plants while it's in the monster zone. But the great thing about it is it has a quick effect where when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can shuffle this card from field or graveyard into the deck and tribute one of your Rikka monsters to negate. I originally had this at 1, but this is a definite 3-up, especially since this is the deck's way to negate the 3-rack crack rock known as Nibiru. Also at 3 copies, Mudon the Rikka Fairy. If special summoned by the effect of a plant monster, it acts as a Rikka Spell and Trap Rhoda, which is always nice, and you can even tribute a plant you control to special summon her from your hand. Each of her effects are once per turn. In addition to this being your level 6, I also run a copy of Erica the Rikka Fairy. She is essentially the N archetype Honest Neos, and when you play with cards like the Rhoda, you're going to need to have a Rikka or plant monster with the matching level. That way you can dig deeper. I'll explain more when we get into the spell game. Next up, I have 1 copy of Snowdrop and 1 copy of Primula the Rikka Fairy. Snowdrop is always a good ace. You can tribute a plant to special summon her and 1 other plant monster from your hand to the field. She can also augment levels by targeting one of the plants you control, including herself. Primula also special summons in defense position but banishes when leaving the field, and she can also augment levels by up to 2. Yes, up to 2. For up to 2 plants. This is kind of your main way using Snowdrop at 1 to get into your bigger Xyz plays. Going into the other plant variations of cards, just the extra plants, I like to run my 3 Evil Thorns. I still like playing with this because it goes into plant combo. You tribute 1 of them that's normal summon to burn for 300 damage to your opponent. After the burn, you can special summon up to 2 more Evil Thorns in face-up attack position, but they can't activate the effect. It's a good little way of going for time. It's also, again, a nice combo line going into that. 2 copies of Lonefire Blossom. This is pretty much tribute and get you a plant. And it's a wonderful card to go with. Next up on the aces, Spore Gotta love Spore. Spore is just so good. Every plant deck plays a Spore. Cactus Bouncer is an interesting card that I've been seeing people use in their plant decks. It's a floodgate that prevents players from special summoning monsters if it shares your board with another plant. Then, of course, the aroma engine of Angelic and Laurel. These work very well together, giving you life points, and when done correctly, Laurel can also act as a tuner. Hand traps, of course, 2 Ash. Pretty standard. We all know how Ash works. Spell game. 2 copies of the field spell Rikka Con Con. If you control a Rikka, you can set a Rikka Speller trap from deck to the field. Also, if a Rikka monster would activate its effect to tribute a card, you can tribute one of your opponent's cards as if it were your own. These effects are also once per turn. I like to work this out with my 1 copy of Rikka Flurries, where once per turn, if one of your plants if one of your Rikkas are tributed, you make the opponent tribute a card of their choice. The caveat is, if at the end of your turn you control non-plant monsters, this card blows up. Flurries is still a nice one-of. Again, its effect affects the player, so if you can catch that wonderful, wonderful Pearly Noir off guard, you can force your opponent to tribute it. Two copies of Rikka Glamour. This is the Rhoda for the deck. You can also tribute a plant to activate it. This lets you get your Rikka monster out and into your hand. And if you've tributed a monster, you can add another Rikka monster that works with the same level. This is what I was talking about when it came with Erica and Mudan the Rikka Fairy. So if you use Mudan off of the tribute for Glamour, you have to pull another level 6 plant, and Erica is the other level 6 plant. Just to keep that in mind. And of course, these Rhodas are once per turn. 2 copies of Trap Tantalizing Tune. You give up a level 4 plant or a continuous trap for a pair of fresh draws. That way you don't have to use Pot of Prosperity to dig through your extra deck. Or if you're on a budget, you have this as a budget draw spell. Two Cosmic Cyclone. That's just the back row get rid of at the cost of a rack. Aces in the deck. A 1-for-1 because Petal's the only level 1 Rikka. You can also go for Spore and the Aroma Seraph cards. Monster Reborn and Called by the Grave. You all know how these cards work. I'm not to explain that stuff to you guys. Trap game. I run 1 Rikka Tranquility and 2 Rikka Sheep. Many duelists have the reverse ratios on these. Tranquility acts as a call of the haunted, and if you tribute a plant monster when you activate it, you can get 2 monsters out. Rikka Sheet lets you take control of an opponent's monster if you tribute a plant monster when you activate it, but you can also negate the plant monster's effects for the turn. I'm experimenting with Spiritual Water Art Aloe. This is one of those cards that's often seen in Rikka side decks. You tribute a water monster you control to rip 1 random card out of your opponent's hand. There's also a pretty interesting combo line going into the extra deck, which I'll talk about momentarily. And lastly, 2 copies of Polynosis. This essentially is Solemn Judgment for plant monsters. But instead of paying half your life points, you tribute a plant monster you control to negate. Going into the extra deck, I run 2 copies of Rikka Queen Strenna. This is actually the only rank 4 of the deck. You can detach a material from this card, then target a plant or Rikka card in your graveyard. Add it to your hand. If it's tributed while it has material, you can literally special summon a rank 5 or higher plant monster and then attach this card to it as material. This is one of those ways that you can also climb into some of your higher ranking plants. I run 1 Kanzashi. She doesn't come up as much. Gets you some graveyard recursion. And of course 2 copies now of Teardrop the Rikka Queen. This is the main monster that you want to go for. Let me show off the secret rare first. Zoom this out a bit. So in any case, Teardrop the Rikka Queen can tribute 1 monster on the field. It doesn't matter if it's yours. You can also tribute your opponent's. And it gains a 300 point boost each time. And if there's plant material plant exceeds material under her, this is a quick effect. Very useful card to go into. And if they outwon, you've got another to go for. I still play the 1 Fairy Archer Inganar is in the main deck. 1 copy of Fairy Knight Inganar. Yes, you need 3 materials to go into this thing. Or you can rank up Exceeds Change, as the Arc 5 anime says it, from Rikka Queen Strenna. Don't do that unless you're really tight on it. You detach 2 materials from this card, and it's a spell speed 4 board bounce. You literally bounce all the other cards on the field to the hand. Your opponent cannot respond. Since Rikkas like to steal the opponent's cards or use them for their own gain, I do like to play the copy of Galaxy Eye Cipher Dragon, which lets you steal one of your opponent's cards and make it itself. And then you can just overlay Cipher Blade Dragon so you don't have to give it back at the end of the turn. Alright. Cipher Blade Dragon's an easy blast for a card, and if it's killed, it brings back the Galaxy Eye Cipher Dragon. 1 Sacred Beast Hyperiton. This is the Omni Negate, depending on the cards under it as Exceeds material. So if you have a spell card under it for as Exceeds material, you can negate a spell once per turn. Monster, a monster, trap, a trap. Now, you can also rank up Exceeds Change into this Omni Negate off of Rikka Queen Strenna to get you a free monster negate. Yeah. I also play the 1 Perialis Empress of Blossoms. She gets you a plant monster from the graveyard once per turn and gains extra points based on the number of other plant monsters she shares the field with. For the link game, 1 Aromatherapy Jasmine. Very useful link too. If you don't have the money to spend on this, you can also go for Sylveon Dance Peon. 1 Marincess Coral Anemone, since the Rikkas are water attribute. Your standard Nightmare Engine of Phoenix and Unicorn. And 1 Bangalancer the Resurgent to bounce back at the cost of 2,500 life points. And you can also banish link monsters whose link ratings equal 4 to bring this back. This is a fun little deck to play with, and if you do well with it, you can even, as a pure breed, cause a lot of disruptions. Really good meta shake-up, folks. But that's all for this deck profile. I really do hope you have enjoyed this. As always, remember to like, sub, and bell for more deck profiles. But for now, I take my cards to the box because I'm done. Bye-bye, everybody.